People have stories they want to share, but have not found a question relevant to them. What are your stories? One late night coming home from an evening out, my husband, a friend of ours, and myself rounded the corner to the stairs that lead to our apartment when we saw it. Sitting about halfway up on the stairs was a possum, eating a sandwich. He was sitting on the stairs just like people do, on his butt, but with his little feet sticking out, and in his hands was a Subway 6-inch. Still in the paper, but slightly unwrapped, just like people eat it. It was like he was a tiny person in a possum suit. There was just something so human-like about everything he was doing. We stood there for what felt like ages watching this possum eating, and trying to figure out what to do. No way we were going to risk walking past him. We finally decided to take the long way around, back to the second set of stairs. But as long as I live, I'll never forget that possum. It was such a truly surreal moment. So in today's video, we're going to try out something a little bit different and read just some very random stories that have no real topic to them. I don't know how this is going to go. I haven't read these stories yet, so hopefully they're interesting in some way. I love my backpack. It's nothing fancy, just a bog standard Element rucksack. But I picked it out, and it's like the only fashion brand article I own. I remember kids in my middle school flipping out over Element gear back in the day, so it brings back fond memories. Anyway, a couple of years ago I was backpacking / road tripping across Canada. We stopped at Hope, BC for a bite to eat before continuing on to Kelowna, where we had booked accommodations for a couple of nights. I don't quite remember how, but we arrived around 9 p.m. and unpacked the car, and I couldn't find my backpack. Bearing in mind this had everything in it: my passport, house keys, iPad, Canadian currency, my favorite sweatshirt, phone charger. I figured the worst, that we had forgotten to lock the car while we were in the cafe, and someone had yoinked it, because I couldn't remember bringing it with me into the shop, and I did not get a lot of sleep that night. The next day I called the diner, just in case I had forgotten it inside. The nicest girl answered the phone and said that yes, there was a backpack there. I asked if she could send it out to Kelowna, and just take whatever it costs out of the cash in the envelope in the bag. She agreed immediately to send it out that evening, and I hung up, relieved. Unfortunately, being a weekend, it didn't arrive before we were due to leave the area on a 7-day camping trip through Alberta, down the Icefields Parkway. So I asked the Airbnb owner if they could send my backpack to our next stop in Calgary, to a UPS drop-off point or whatever, and again just help themselves to some cash. She agreed, and I left on a weekend-long trip with no signal, camping in the Rockies. It was a great week. I almost forgot that I was missing just about everything I would have needed to get home to Europe. I remember finally understanding what Bilbo said in Lord of the Rings. I want to see the mountains again, Gandalf. Mountains. And then find somewhere where I can rest. I still wish I could go back there and do it all over. Leaving Banff, though, I came back down to earth with a bump. We got to Calgary for On Canada Day, so everything was closed, which meant another night of worrying. But the next day I was first in line at the UPS store to pick up my parcel. It was such a relief seeing the familiar shade of burgundy when I opened it up, and everything was in there, minus about $40 in shipping costs. Whenever I looked at my bag, I remember how nice people can be when you just ask for help. They went out of their way to help an idiot stranger get his bag back, and I remember all the more vividly that wonderful trip through an amazing country. So it sounds like you went on one vacation while your bag went on a completely different vacation, just getting mailed from one place to another trying to catch up to you. I haven't told this story in a while, but Uber Eats scammed me out of $2,000 plus and ruined my 20th birthday. It was pretty much my first birthday where I was on my own and didn't celebrate with my family at all, since I was a 5-hour drive away at college. It also fell on a Tuesday, so I wasn't able to do anything with friends either. The plan was to grab dinner at an Indian place that Friday to celebrate. I got out of class early, and my only celebration was to order some IHOP through the Uber Eats app. It was like my 3rd time using it. Anyway, I got some chicken tenders for $16, then took a 5-hour nap. Real exciting. I woke up at around 8 p.m., after all the food places on campus closed. So I figured, F it, it's my birthday, let's order out twice. So I tried to get some chicken nugs for McDonald's delivered. I press confirm order, the page loads, and I get an error. Okay, strange, let's try again. Another error. One more. I Google the error code, and it keeps popping up whenever a card gets declined. That can't be right. The meal costs like $13, and at this time I have about $1,000 on my bank account. For anyone who has a student wallet through the PNC, you know that it's basically 3 accounts in one. You have a checking account and 2 savings accounts that are all linked to each other. As a broke college student, this was quite literally all I had to survive on. So I checked my bank. Every account was cleared out. $0 across the board. I had over 30 different pending transactions, all from Uber Eats. They ranged from 99 cents to $104, going until every account was emptied. I was sitting at around minus $600 by the time I checked. So obviously I'm freaking out. My bank was closed, so I couldn't call them. I hit the Uber Eats customer service. They asked me to list every transaction, which I do. They confirm the transactions came from them. Then the agent tells me that there are just temporary holds that they always do, and the money won't actually leave my account. Okay, but over 30 transactions? I spent hours trying to figure out what exactly went wrong in their system, and each agent kept giving me the same copy and pasted response. The charges won't post to your account, just wait. The thing is, with debit cards, they treat pending transactions as if money is already off your card, so I couldn't use my money at all. I was helpless. The next morning I called my bank as soon as they opened. My card was cancelled, and they had to dispute each charge. There were so many of them that they couldn't fit all under one report, and had to be split into 3. Usually when you dispute a transaction, the bank gives you a provisional credit, which is a temporary refund of your money. They could only provisionally refund me on one case report, which still left me at about minus $150. I would have to wait the 2 months until the investigation ended, until I would get the rest of my money back. Oh, and guess what? The money did leave my account. Not only that, but I was hit for 10 overdraft fees for $35 each, for all the ones that bounced. And when I went back to Uber Eats about this, they kept repeating the same message that the transactions wouldn't post. They already posted. That entire week was a mess. I was stranded at college with literally no money. My family struggles enough, and my mom had to skip a few bills to send me cash through MoneyGram. I couldn't have the money come through my bank account because it'd be eaten from all the fees I had accrued. I even canceled the get-together that Friday, even though we were able to go in the end. Happy birthday to me, F Uber Eats. You know, they say that eating out is a waste of money, but I think this really tops that. My great-grandmother lived in a nursing home for the last 2 years of her life. She was about 95, with minimal eyesight and hearing when this happened. My great-grandmother told my mother she was afraid of that lady in black. What woman in black? My mother would ask. The one that is standing at my bed every night. I think she is finally coming to get me. Naturally, my mother dismissed this as a figment of her granny's imagination. One evening, when my mother was visiting, great-grandma told her, "I think I'm going to die tonight. Can you stay? I don't want to be alone when the lady in black comes for me." So my mother stayed at her bed, sleeping uncomfortably in an old armchair. Suddenly, she awoke to some noise that she could not immediately pinpoint, but she saw a figure in a long black gown, standing at the far end of the bed. My mother's scream must have woken the whole nursing home, but it especially scared the lady in black. She turned tail, left the room, and ran into one of those nurses, who came running to investigate my mother's scream. It turned out the lady in black was my great-grandma's bedridden and demented neighbor. Nobody knew she could actually walk, let alone dress up in her favorite black dress and wander the nursing home at night. Apparently she was seen by some of the other inhabitants, who, fearing they would thought to be crazy, simply never talked about the ghosts that would enter their rooms at night to stand at their beds and water their plants. Well, I guess this kinda just solves that whole video I just did about unexplained events. Turns out all those ghosts you see in your house are just some really old person with dementia. I've shared this before, but my friend from grad school had previously been a skydiving instructor in Colorado, and had jumped more than 600 times. One of these times, he, for some reason, had his wallet in his suit, and it fell out. Fell to the earth somewhere. He figured, this sucks, but oh well. Absolutely no chance of finding it. Separately, a man in rural Colorado was found murdered. Turns out in their remote cabin where he lived with his daughter, he had been sexually abusing her, and she finally had enough and killed him. The police searched the house and all of his property. Found my friend's wallet in the trunk of his car. The police thought to themselves, freaking idiot murderer left his wallet in the dude's trunk? Easiest arrest ever. My friend had a super believable alibi of, couldn't have been me, officer. Actually, the wallet fell out of my pants while I was skydiving. So, did the wallet land in the guy's trunk, or did that guy just find it and pick it up and put it in his trunk? I think it'd be a lot cooler if it landed in the trunk, honestly. My family pet growing up was named Arwen, and she was a massive Airedale Terrier. She was the light of our lives, truly the world's best dog. She would herd the chickens and let the baby chicks nestle into her fur and nap on her as she sat quietly in the sunshine, not moving lest the peeps be disturbed. But her most heroic act came when my brother Liam, about 10 at the time, was trying to move our basketball hoop and base out into the yard for the summer. He didn't notice the 2 rattlesnakes coiled up under the base, but Arwen did. She leaped in front of Liam, between him and the snakes, and both Liam and my dad, who was nearby, saw both snakes strike. Dad ran and grabbed Liam, pulled him away, pulled Arwen aside with the other hand, then sent Liam running to grab the hatchet to dispatch the snakes. We took Arwen inside and put her on her bed, and we called the vet. The vet said he would come out to put the dog down, but if she was bitten by 2 snakes, there was basically no chance she'd live. But my mom said no way in hell she was putting her baby down without a fight. So she did some Googling and found out that just loading the poor dog with Benadryl can counteract snake venom. And that's just what she did. Arwen lay still, swollen and bleeding, for 3 days. But then she got up and walked around, and she lived 5 more years, dying at 17. She was the best dog. So how does somebody actually find out that Benadryl is the cure to snake poison in a dog? Like, that's such an oddly specific thing that somebody had to try, and then it miraculously worked. Back in early 2018, when I first moved to Utah to start school, I was at a 7-Eleven where there was this girl, and she was asking for directions to the train station. I pointed her in the right direction, but she was walking. I figured, F it, I have an hour until class, so I'll give her a ride. She tells me about studying or volunteering in Puerto Rico or Costa Rica or some other Spanish country for months. She says she came out here to explore the area, and that she moved in with an old high school friend, but he ended up being crazy and flipped out on her. She had to pretty much jump out of his truck because he wouldn't pull over. She was planning on just taking the bus out, but she left her wallet in his place. I tell her let's go grab it real quick, but he ended up following us there, and I flipped a quick U-turn out of there. Ended up completely just leaving everything there because I figured this dude might shoot us. I let her use my charger so she can get in contact with her parents to give her enough money to buy a ticket home, and sent her on her way. I had to get to class, so I kinda left in a hurry once I dropped her off at the station, and didn't get her info, so she couldn't let me know if she made it home safe. I never got her name, but I know she was going somewhere in the Midwest. So if the story sounds familiar and you remember a buff, bearded Mexican dude in a white Volkswagen hatchback helping you out, let me know that you're okay. It's been on my mind forever because I never knew what happened after I left. You know, I was gonna say this sounds like a scene out of Pulp Fiction, and to add on top of that, I'm pretty sure this happened very nearby where I live. So that makes it feel even more like Pulp Fiction. Wife was on her first Zoom meeting last March in the kitchen. I asked if I could be off-screen cooking breakfast quietly, and she said yes, as long as I'm quiet and not distracting. I wound up burning what I was cooking, causing lots of smoke. Then when I was trying my best to get the situation under control, my robe that I was wearing laid on the burner and started smoking. So basically my wife told me not to be distracting, and I wound up lighting myself on fire. To her credit, she maintained poise and completely ignored my situation. We still laugh about it a year later. You know, you ever just like walking around your house during the day, just doing your normal thing, but you don't feel like you're making much noise. But then at night, you try to do that same thing, but somehow everything just sounds so much louder. One time I was walking across campus, stoned. I'm walking by 2 kids, aged maybe 10 and 5, like 20 meters away. Not sure why they were without an adult, but they were. The younger one looks at me and yells, "Hey, I like your shirt." So I yell, thanks. He responds, "And your backpack is okay." I don't respond. The older one yells, "He's working on his compliments." We both continue on our ways. A few 100 meters away, a dude about my age walks up with a tray of cookies. Says, "Hey, you want a cookie?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love a cookie. What's the cookie for?" He says, "No reason, just handing out cookies. You want 2? I say, "Yeah, I'd love 2 cookies. Thanks a lot, bud." So I take 2 cookies and they were awesome. It was a pretty good walk. See, this is the kind of really random story that I find entertaining. I don't know why. It kind of reminds me when my family was in Hawaii one time, and me and my brother went and got a pizza from the Little Caesars and inside the Target, and we didn't have anywhere to sit down, so we just set the pizza on top of the rack of carts, and we're just eating the pizza on the carts. And this one dude's just like cruising around, just having the best day of his life, I guess, just like talking to every person he walks past. He sees this homeless guy, he's like, "Hey, cool shoes," and he just looks at it, he's like, "Hey, that looks good." And he just keeps walking by. I was at the zoo one time when I was younger for a camp trip, and I stopped by the gorilla enclosure. The gorillas, being gorillas, were ambling all over the place and hooting like crazy. But for some odd reason, when they saw my face, they were enchanted. I had 4 or 5 gorillas just staring at me, and lounging around. They didn't seem territorial or anything. I ended up playing a game of peekaboo with one of them, and unfortunately never got to see any of the other enclosures. It's a fond memory, that's for sure. The chimps did the same thing to me as I was walking out of the zoo. Like, what did they want from me? What did they see in me? I'm not sure, and I don't think we'll ever know. Maybe you're a descendant of Tarzan, and they saw what could have been the king of the apes. I was in the middle of a contract once with a guy when blood started pouring out of his ear. He ran straight out the door without a word, and I was all kinds of worried for him. I'm so glad he turned back up later that week and explained he just had surgery on that ear. I sometimes wonder how I would have felt if he never came back. I kept fearing what sort of condition could cause that sort of thing to happen out of the blue. You know, I've had many bloody noses in the past, and those do show up out of nowhere, but I've never really had a bloody ear. I don't think blood normally comes out of there. In a busy revolving door downtown, a guy stopped mid-cycle to pick up something on the floor. As he bent over, the glass partition in the revolving door immediately behind him whacked him hard in the butt. The guy made a big scene, yelling at the person behind him that he did it on purpose, and that he was going to call his lawyer. Those darn revolving doors always attacking people. I once gave the singer Meatloaf 2 very awkward handshakes. This was obviously a few years back, when both conventions and handshakes were a thing. Meatloaf arrived at his booth, and the first thing he did was go down his line to personally shake hands with everyone there. Unexpectedly, Meatloaf was offering handshakes with his left hand. And me being a righty, when the time came for me to shake his hand, my brain had a meltdown of what to do. So instead of also using my left hand to shake his hand, I extended both hands and awkwardly cupped his. I knew I messed up, so I didn't commit to the awkward hand cupping. So on top of it being awkward, it was also loose. And if there's one thing that makes handshakes worse, it's when they're weirdly limp. He then went to his booth, began signing autographs, and eventually I made my way to the front. I got my autograph, and once again he offered his left hand to shake. The second handshake was slightly better than the first. In that time I only extended one hand, my right, which then I noticed and went, oh, and then finally successfully offered my left hand. He shook it, and I went on my merry way with my autograph and a new story to tell. Very nice man, was very friendly to his fans, and never once brought up my inability to give a proper handshake to a left hand. Well, I can understand the nerves when you're meeting a very popular family dinner. I had a very similar interaction when I met one of my favorite professional snowboarders while snowboarding, and it was basically like, oh, handshake to fist bump, oh, change my mind, oh, change my mind, okay. So when I was a teenager, I was in an iconic trio of friendship with Patrick and Pinky. Once we got older though, we all moved around, and we would hang out in pairs, but it was hard to coordinate us all hanging out at the same time. About 5 years ago, we were all finally free, just after Christmas, and decided to meet up at our favorite spot, Dennys. Patrick had been dating this girl who was awful, and I did not like her. She was mean. They fought a lot. It was a very toxic relationship. However, Pinky had made a painting of Patrick and her as a Christmas present, and brought it with her to the restaurant. We also had a video camera going, so all this is on tape. We were just filming us being silly and stuff. Patrick ended up dropping the news that their girlfriend was trying to get pregnant. My reaction on tape is, why? We then proceeded to have a deep friends talk with them about how that's a terrible idea, and they opened up about how they were really feeling about it and how things were in the relationship, and we were basically trying to convince them to break up with her. But then we had this freaking painting, so what are we gonna do with it? Awkward. So me and Pinky went into the women's restroom, and on the wall there was nothing but a nail. We hung the painting up and it fit perfectly. Even the colors coordinated with the style of the bathroom. It was perfect and the funniest thing ever. We left it there for years and would each go back and visit it whenever one of us was in town. Apparently a while back though, that Dennys closed down, but luckily the painting was saved and it now lives at Patrick's brother's house. Yeah, I guess that if you're an employee at Dennys, you probably don't care enough to investigate where a painting came from, and you're just gonna be like, well, alright, I guess it's just there, I'm not gonna do anything about it. Waiting for my takeout at a Chinese restaurant when this middle-aged man storming in complaining that he'd been waiting 30 minutes outside for them to bring him his spaghetti. The bar staff tried to explain that he might have been looking for the Italian restaurant next door, but he wasn't having any of that. Screaming commences for 5 minutes, climaxing with this brilliant line, "What the heck do you know? I have a master's degree." Shortly after that, his wife calls asking where the heck he is, and he starts blaming the staff. She starts yelling at him and he gets all sheepish, then slinks out the door to the Italian restaurant next door. Hilarious to witness, but I felt sorry for the waitstaff, so I left a 40% tip. Inside joke in the family now to say, I have a master's degree, when things start getting heated. Normally calms things down pretty quick. Well, I hope that master's degree has really taught you a lot about which restaurant you're supposed to be picking your food up from. A few weeks back, I was driving a car, and there was a motorcycle some 20 feet in front of me. On it were a couple and their son. When we were taking a 90-degree turn, it lost control, and they fell, and I kid you not, as soon as I realized they were falling, my perception went into some kind of slow motion, kinda like in the Matrix bullet scene. In the split second that the bike lost control and they fell, I estimated the distance between us, how fast I was going, how much I needed to brake to stop hitting them, should I and could I swerve right just to be sure I don't hit them, and checked if there were any vehicles overtaking me. And all the while the lady was falling down in some kind of slowed down video. As soon as they hit the road and I braked hard, everything went back to normal and my tires stopped a few inches from their head. There was another split second where everything went faster than normal, but that was small. Everyone was safe. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a common thing when your adrenaline is really pumping. When you get really sucked in and focused on something, then it really feels like time slows down. It's also true if you're like really good at something, like let's say you're a professional athlete, and you were right in the heat of the moment, then it really does feel like time slows down. It's kind of hard to explain. My father has gotten into a fist fight with a raccoon, a buck, a turkey, and goat, all on separate occasions. And at this point I'm scared of the thought of him going somewhere with more dangerous animals like Alaska or Australia. Yeah, I've seen people get into fist fights with kangaroos in Australia, so... Well, that's all the stories I'm going to include in this video. I actually have a lot more from these threads. So if you like these sort of random stories, let me know. I'll probably make like a part 2, maybe a part 3 and 4 for all of these just random off-topic stories. But yeah, that's all for tonight. If you guys don't follow Faye's channel, I definitely recommend checking out the most recent video. It was actually pretty funny.